We are, some of you know that a couple of years ago at our annual meeting, we had Bill Parsons talk to us about boats and some of the work at Palmer Johnson. He's been a resident at in Sturgeon Bay off and on since 1952, but also, I'm told, New York, North Africa, Savannah, Georgia. But during those years, this has been home. Bill is a CPA. He was vice president and then president of Palmer Johnson until 2000. Bill is currently chair of Palmer Johnson Enterprises and Palmer Johnson Power Systems and serves on many local and state boards, including, when he's in town, ours. He's a longtime runner, and his total miles have taken him twice around the world in starts and stops. After the last presentation, people said, don't stop. And we've got many requests. And last year we said, why don't you come back? Oh, no, nobody wants to hear me. So this year we are privileged that he decided to come back. And please greet Bill Parsons for me.
Thank you, Russ. It's a privilege to be back on such a nice day. The sun's coming out, and with such an august group. You know, this is an aside. Some people just are contributors by their very nature, and as Russ May was passing around plaudits a little earlier, he settled in on our treasurer, who's been contributing since the start of our organization. When Russ paused before we ate to talk about people making sacrifices, people you don't know, but people who did them in places that you couldn't pronounce, Bob Graef's name came to mind. He was 18 back in the early 40s, and he became a Marine, and President Roosevelt sent him to the South Pacific. So what he did there was simply to make 4, count them, I think Tinian, Saipan, Okinawa, one I can't think of, 4 amphibious landings. Not without injury. He's got the medals to prove it. But he kept coming back and made a contribution then, like he's continuing to do now. Let's have a big hand for Bob Graef. And lots of spirit there. He's going to continue to be our treasurer forever, I think. At least, you know, I was placing these things, and Betty was, before you all came. There's memorabilia and pictures and so on. And as I was kind of putting the last one in, it occurred to me that, good heavens, this is what they do at funerals. I'm happy to be able to tell you that PJ, as I know it, Palmer Johnson, as I know it, is far from dead. In fact, there's happy news, and just recent, and I'll get to that in just a short bit. But just quickly, for those of you who weren't here the last time, a little history. We, for years, decided that we had started in 1918, and we actually made a scrapbook that and had a 75th anniversary. And then someone came up with a scrapbook of their own, which showed pictures of that building on Michigan Street, right next to the bridge. And in the lower right-hand corner, it said 1902. And floating out there were some launches that were clearly yachts. So the history of Palmer Johnson, or what is Palmer Johnson, goes back even further. It's almost 110 years old. But it had, in fact, it wasn't Palmer Johnson. It was Sturgeon Bay Boat Works during its early years. And if you go to the museum, Maritime Museum, you'll find photos with that building, or in the Launch Cafe over on 3rd Avenue. There's a picture of the group, including Palmer Johnson, standing in front of Sturgeon Bay Boat Works. It really wasn't until 1961 when the yard was purchased by Pat Hagerty, a Texan who was at the time president of Texas Instruments. He brought his son-in-law, Mike Kelsey, up with him, and they started and decided that the name of the place ought to be Palmer Johnson. In fact, there's still quite a few people that think that it was a partnership, that Palmer and Johnson are two separate people. In fact, a friend of ours said she was at a yacht club after a sail race about 25 years ago in Rochester, New York, great sailing town and a great yacht club for sailing. And one of the members who had recently bought a boat started a conversation about the fact that he had a friend who'd just been at Palmer and Johnson. And the gal said, well, that's nice in Sturgeon Bay. I've been there, used to live there, she said. But the name is not Palmer and Johnson. The name is Palmer Johnson. And he looked at her and he said, young lady, I've been at this a while, and I know the industry, and I assure you, it's properly Palmer and Johnson. And she said, sir, Palmer Johnson was my father. And she was Cleta Johnson Galligan. She lives here in Sturgeon Bay. And she's still a great sailor, just like her father was, and she was growing up. Anyway, Palmer Johnson continues. You know, you may be aware that during the past 18 months or so, there's been a downturn in the marine industry, in the yachting industry. In fact, it's affected some other areas in the economy as well, I'm told. But it got pretty bleak, and then happily, about 3 weeks ago, my partner's son, Mike Kelsey, who is now in charge, he's president in charge of sales, was able to announce to the world that they had contracted to build a 170-footer. They were currently building, on speculation, 250-footers, and so this boat is going to fit nicely into the schedule. And what it will mean is that as of about a month ago, the employment at Palmer Johnson was down to about 185, and Mike estimates to me that by Christmas time of this year, they should be back up to about 300. That's in the good news category, but let me tell you about the challenges, because the industry is full of challenges. They've started this boat. When I went down to pick up my newspaper this morning, the Saturday crew was in. They're working. The reason is this 170-footer, a multi, probably a $30 million boat, is for delivery next June. Huh? You think that's something? I can tell you that's something. And they've been good recently on deliveries, and that's because the industry has changed. And the industry has changed because of the computer. That's what's done it. When we started in the 60s, we were early on building aluminum sailboats. We started by building a hull upside down and then turning it over. And after we'd done the metal parts, then the plumbers would come, and then they'd install all the mechanical systems, including the engine, and then it was the carpenter's turn. And so we built boats sequentially. And as you can guess, it was in these series for a boat like the ones I'm going to show you, could take anywhere from 18 months to 2.5 years. And now what's happening, in fact, we did a thing called lofting. Lofting is laying out, getting architectural drawings and laying them out on a floor. And they do that to make it all full size from the lines that the loftsman, who was a skilled, probably the most skilled boat builder in the yard, was the loftsman. Jerry Keno was his name, by the way, and he's a Door County citizen forever, just like just about all the employees that work there. And then you would take patterns off the lines in the loft floor. The computers today are so good that you don't have to do that anymore. The lofting phase is over, and right now at Palmer Johnson, the 170-footer, they're building the metal pieces, all in sections. Everything is coming directly from a computer to a numerical control cutting machine. Both the aluminum and the wood, it's all being done not sequentially, but it's all being done at once, and then assembled all at the same time, and it all fits, hopefully. Or at least that's the plan. And it has been, and indeed, Palmer Johnson has gained a reputation recently for sport yachts. And those sport yachts are part of come from the really great pen hand of two young designers, not quite so young anymore, but still young designers from Venice, Italy. One is Carlo Nuvolari, whose father was a race car driver for Alfa, and the other one is a tall, 6'4", dark-haired fellow, handsome as all get out, by the name of Dan Leonard, and he's actually a Slovenian. That's the country right next to Italy, and those two are in office. And the first big breakthrough project that they had in the United States, and it was really their career-making project, was on a boat called La Baronessa. We had initially were thinking we were going to make a nice, convenient PowerPoint presentation so I could push buttons and have pictures, until we were informed that there was no way of making this place dark. So what we've done instead is taken some from our gallery and other places, some photos of boats that we've built. And this is La Baronessa. This is the largest boat that was built, has ever been built in Sturgeon Bay as a yacht. It's the largest yacht built or was for a time in the United States since the 1930s. And I spoke the other day with Mike Kelsey Jr., and as far as we know, it still is the largest all-aluminum yacht ever constructed. 195 feet, 35 feet wide, draws 11 and a half feet. Now, excuse me. 42,000 gallons. And actually, what happens is because aluminum alloy is the strength-weight ratios compared with steel, your hull is one-third the weight of a steel hull. That means they could put 1,900 horsepower twin engines in instead of 2,400 horsepower, because at first we looked at the design with a steel hull and an aluminum superstructure, and then through tank tests decided that we could do this all in aluminum. Not everybody in the world is good at welding aluminum. It's an issue, and you can teach people to weld steel more easily, and most of the larger boats that are built are done with either completely all of steel or with steel hull and an aluminum superstructure, as we were thinking about. The customer for La Baronessa was somebody we knew about when we first sat down to talk about it in 1996. His name, David Eng, E-N-G, anglicized, originally from a clothing manufacturer in Hong Kong, and he came to settle in Singapore. And we knew him quite well because some 3 years previous to that, we had built a 150-footer for him, which seemed like a giant boat at the time, but is actually only in displacement at about a quarter of what this boat is. These things, you'd think, such a project, it's a forever. I learned yesterday that there is a 240-footer being built for David Eng as we speak in Australia at the moment. He apparently had an interest there, and he's building the custom yacht there. What's happened is since, well, in the year 2000, my partner, Mike Kelsey, and I sold all the marine parts to a customer of ours. His name was, unfortunately, Andy McKelvey. We were having discussion earlier about a local citizen who is something of an eccentric, and it was pointed out to me at lunch that this guy has had 6 wives. Well, Andy was one up. Andy had 7 wives. And as he told me when he was sitting in my office one afternoon, yeah, number 7's not going so well. But she was lovely. I can attest to that. And I don't know anyway why people have 7 wives. We were only hoping for people that they'd have 7 boats. and keep the same wife, right. But anyway, this was a 2.5-year proposition, building a Baronessa, and it was always interesting. David made it known in the world trade that he had paid $35 million for this boat from Palmer Johnson. and that was close, but the actual number was closer to 25. The issue was, as the invoices kept coming and getting closer to 25, David said he had problems making the payments. It was my job to set the alarm, get up at 2 in the morning because his office was in Singapore, and plead with him to pay the last invoice so that we could keep going. And it worked out. We didn't collect what we needed, but we made it through. And that's sort of how it is in the yachting industry. It's exciting sometimes, terrifying sometimes, and I assure you, never dull. You know, the ups and downs, getting down into a scale we can all kind of recognize. We had a customer, really nice man, from Chicago. He was an architect, very, very good architect. And we had contracted to build a 44-foot fiberglass boat that was being built in Finland. This is an architect of some note. His name was Harry Weiss. The skyline of Chicago has 5 of it. In fact, Harry did a study, a feasibility study, to build a mile-high building and got architects to attest to the fact that it could be done. No buyers, however. But, pardon? Yeah, anyway, by the way, that's right. Harry was active here in Door County. He was a friend of Ben Heinemann's, who we built a boat for. So if you go around Ellison Bay, there's a library just south of Ellison Bay that's cantilevered off the escarpment, done with an all-teak interior by Palmer Johnson. It was designed by Harry Weiss for Ben Heinemann. And it just so happens that one of our steering committee members, 2 of our steering committee members, Jim and Barb Bunning, live in a Harry Weiss house that he designed and built on Bayshore Drive. Well, the boat was a bit late. Harry wasn't too happy, but one day it finally came, and he went off for his first cruise, left from our yard in Racine on Saturday morning to come back Sunday night. Sunday afternoon, I had a call from Gene Herman, our yard manager in Racine. Bill, we've got an issue. Said, what's up? And he said, I just heard from Harry. He's at the yard. He got back. He's angry, and I think more than a little drunk. You might get a call from him. And I said, I'll prepare. I said, what happened? And he said, well, the best I could make of it is, you know, the aft stateroom has a bathroom head, as they call them, in a marine field. And they install the toilet, and it seemed to be working all right until the second day when Mrs. Weiss couldn't seem to quite operate it. So she thought if she just tried a little harder, maybe if she just kept pumping. Well, she did, and with a bang, a rubber hose blew off, scattering everything over the stateroom and herself. And I said, oops. I guess I can't dare hide, but I'm ready waiting for the call. None came until the next morning about 10 o'clock. And it wasn't Harry Weiss, it was Gene Herman. And he said, the pressure's off, Bill. I said, whew, whatever did you do? And he said, you know, he'd sobered up by this time. And you know what a nice man he is. And I said, yeah, he is. We all know that. I said, I met him at the yard just half an hour ago, and I began by apologizing. And he said, oh, Butch, don't even think about it. He said, you know, this is what happens on projects. He said, things go wrong. He said, I specifically know about toilets because 6 weeks ago, we opened the Time Life building in Chicago and 130 toilets didn't work. These are the ups and downs and the things that carry you through. Now, the goodwill of customers helps a lot. Let me assure you. What happened is a year or so after David took delivery of this boat, the big number that he was trying to sell it for came into reach, and a fellow from Turkey bought it. I wrote it down here. His name is, well, you'll find out later. Anyway, he bought the boat, and it cruised the Eastern Mediterranean for about 3 months, and then it seems like he had become involved in a financial transaction with Motorola, and it was something of an international crisis almost, because he was sued for $2 billion that he supposedly took Motorola for, and the boat sat for about a year and a half. By this time, its name is Frequency, and then moved closer to Spain. It's now back again under still a third name or a fourth name, and it is now Shubra 2 and owned by a gentleman from Lebanon. So this is what happens. The man was interesting. I think David, he owned buildings. He had a disco in Singapore that held 5,000 young people. He had invested in real estate all over Indonesia. He had friends that were mostly Singaporean. They scuba dived a lot. David, was a teetotaler. I mean, I don't think in the 8 years that we worked together, I ever saw him take a drink. I can tell you, though, we had other customers that made up for him. Because we had some actually absolutely brilliant achievers in that category. And one of them, thank you. I'm going to go back to the sailboat era. And this fellow was really not so far from home. His name was Charles Sella. He was about 50 years old and 6'5" or 6'6" or so, tall, handsome, big guy. At one time, he was a nationally ranked squash player. And he'd had just a brief history in yachting. His son played football for Kansas State back in the 80s, just at the end of the 80s. They went to a bowl game. Charles said to his teammates, you guys win this, we'll all go sailing. And they didn't. But he decided he'd take them anyway. So what Charles did is he went out into the market, and he was a very impulsive man. He bought a 100-foot sailboat, with not really very much sailing experience, hired a competent captain, and took off with 15 of Kansas State for a trip across the Atlantic. Huh? They sailed all the way from Newport to I think they ended up in Southampton. And by this time, he decided he really liked boats, and so he got involved in building this boat, which was the Astral. This man was, I think, as colorful as anyone we've ever seen. And he came by it honestly, I think, because his family had been in the theater business, and they owned vaudeville theaters. To this day, Charles still owns racetracks. He owns one in Oak Lawn in Arkansas, where each year they run the Arkansas Derby. And we came down to St. Louis one afternoon, flew in. Bill Langan, the president of Sparkman Stevens, Mike Kelsey, and myself, and rented a car and drove out to Charles's house in a suburb of St. Louis, Ladue. Maybe you know that name. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch, when they covered the launching of his boat, referred to Charles as the Maharaja of Ladue. And we spent this afternoon going over plans, except that Charles wasn't content to just work. He had this new bottle of vodka that he just opened, and he decided we should join him in helping out and getting the boat ready, and then we'd all go to dinner. Well, Charles drank faster than the rest of us, but he still seemed to be okay until all of a sudden he looked at his watch and said, "Oh my God, it's 10:30." And he said, "What are we going to do?" "Oh, I know." He said, "There's a place I want to take you in St. Louis. There's a nice restaurant called Tony's. If some of you are from St. Louis, you may have heard." So he called Tony's. It is the reputation restaurant in St. Louis. He called Tony's on the phone at 10:30 and said, "This is Charles Sulla. I'm coming down with 4 others for dinner." "I'm sorry, Mr. Sulla, we're closed." "Oh, no, you're not. You just open right back up, because we're on our way right now, and I won't hear another word." And they did. So we had, in fact, I remember coming back and telling Betty, he opened this bottle of wine at the restaurant that said 1956 on it. And I said, it tasted a little musty, if you really want to know. But anyway, he continued, and when we were all done, this is about 12:30, we all piled into his big Mercedes, Bill Langan in the front and Mike and I in the back, and he was taking us down to our hotel room in St. Louis. He said, "We'll get your car tomorrow. So right now we're going to get you to the hotel room." So we headed down the street, and all of a sudden he realized, "Oh, I've gone by." So he made an appropriate an immediate left turn to go the wrong way on a one-way street, because that's the way the Sheraton was, all right? And we made 1 block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks, and all of a sudden, at the corner of the 4th block, there's a squad car. And I could just see it all. There goes the boat deal. There's Charles with his arms out over the hood, and we're standing there watching and kissing the project goodbye. I could see out of my window this officer in the car look up, look at him, looked away. He knew him. Charles had a license. Anyway, it didn't happen. He showed up. We signed the contract the next day, and built this 118-footer that he owned for quite a long time. One of the happiest of customers. It was a brilliant job all the way. Not all customers end up with love affairs with their boatyard, and here's the next one. And the last one. I'm using your patience, so I need to hurry. John Millar was an Englishman. He must be gone. He was about 80 when he built this boat. It was designed by Frank McClear, a New York designer, same one that designed a boat for Ben Heineman and George Kress, the Aria Green Bay boat that we built that was around in Green Bay for years. It's a brigantine, a square rigger, and he started out to be just a great friend of ours. It took about that lasted for about 2/3 of the project, and suddenly things started going astray. And in the early stages, he was so friendly that he invited my partner, Mike Kelsey, to become a member of the Royal Yacht Squadron. The Royal Yacht Squadron is like the New York Yacht Club, except more so. In order to be a member, if you're a member of the of the Royal Yacht Squadron, you can fly this ensign on the back. That's the Cross of St. George. And Mike, as a result, got to have the Cross of St. George that he could fly as an ensign on the sailboat that he had. But as the project was coming to a conclusion, John Millar said, "I'm going to ask you to give back your membership. And if you're a gentleman, you'll do so." Well, Mike said no. Anyway, so he stood up to him, and interesting in so many ways, he had an entourage that came with him to the boatyard. He spent a lot of time in Sturgeon Bay. The boat's one of the few that we've done that has a figurehead. It's supposedly taken from a live body cast of the young lady, about 22 or 3, that accompanied him, who he claimed was a Tahitian princess, and that this was taken from her and then carved into this figurehead. What we do know is she may indeed have been a Tahitian princess, but he found her at the point in her career that she was dancing in a club in Paris. I need to close, but I need to tell you, it's 2 o'clock. well, I'll let you have questions, okay? But I do want to say one thing. Excuse me? Yeah. Oh, all right. It was really kind of remarkable for me. It was, as you can tell, quite an experience. I had two partners. One, Edward T. Willman, everyone called him Shuff. The other one, Martin C. Kelsey, Jr., everyone called him Mike. These two guys were absolutely top drawer extroverts. You know, sometimes you get in a situation, particularly if you tend to been born an introvert, where you have awkward feelings about how are we going to break the conversation, or how are we going to reach, just that feeling of discomfort. Never happened with Shuffy, never happened with Mike. Neither were ever at a loss for words. They were always there. In fact, Shuffy died early of cancer. We lost him. Mike and I then continued on, and we had the next 15 years in a really true partnership. It was fun. And I enjoyed Mike so much, I still miss him all the time because he was brash and outgoing. He was sometimes get ahead of himself. He knew the answer to everything, it seemed. And you know, you've met people like that. But he countered all that with being kind and thoughtful and gentle, and really all of his employees recognized that, and they all loved him. He was a legend, still is, and his son, happily, has the job of running the shipyard today. So it's really, there's a very happy story here. And, you know, I'm just so hopeful that this great breakthrough that they've had, it has a lot to do with Nuvolari and Leonard, the feeling of the superstructure, the sport boats that they're making now. They're not particularly selling in the United States. Almost all the customers for these boats have been in Europe. But they're really big in the Mediterranean, and we're going to keep them going. Now, questions, anyone, please? Yes?
You may not want to answer this. How do you, considering the credit climate today, how do you finance 250-foot spec boats and a 195-footer?
You know, do you hear the question? How do you finance in today's credit market specification? You know, I'll tell you how. You have money. If you need a bank, it's hopeless. Right. That's exactly right. And that's a story of its own, which you need to hear a little bit about Tim Mohammed. Sounds like an Arab name, is an Arab name. Tim Mohammed is really a legend of his own. He's from South America, not the Near East. He's from South America. He's from Guyana. It used to be British Guyana, you know, British and French and Dutch, Suriname, all that. As a youngster growing up in Guyana, he began to participate in a sport the British do called cricket. And by the time he was done, he was one of the top 10 ranked cricket players in the world, Tim Mohammed. And he was in the fact that they didn't have many world-class athletes in Guyana, as you could guess, the national hero of Guyana. He was like Tiger Woods is today in the United States. And about the time that he retired, the president of Guyana urged him to come back and said, Tim, if you'll come back to Guyana and live here for a bit, I'll give you some fishing rights. So he got miles of coastline for shrimp fishing. Sounds like Bubba Gump, doesn't it? Huh? Anyway, that's what happened. And by the time he was done, he had 250 boats. Along came somebody who wanted him, and suddenly he's a centimillionaire. And he went to build a boat at Palmer Johnson, and his boat was under construction at the time that Andy McKelvey's boatyard that he had bought from us, he owned it just 3 years, and then it was a bad time in the boat industry, and he couldn't make things work, and so the whole yard declared Chapter 11. After an absence of some months, Tim Mohammed picked it out and decided he wanted to own a boatyard and build boats. Mind you, courageous guy. He owns a yard in England and a yard in Norway that he's bought in the last 2 years. And Mike tells me they're building a 200-footer in Norway, but the entire interior is going to be built here in Sturgeon Bay. So that's all. I mean, he's put up buildings here in town, as you know. And when they ran out of orders, he decided to build 250-footers on speculation. And those aren't off, but because they're further ahead with the metalwork. But all's on the 170 at the moment, and that's their emphasis. Yes, Greg.
Palmer Johnson, Bill Tiger Woods boat, and any interesting stories, if so, around that relationship?
About wood?
Tiger Woods, the Palmer Johnson
Oh, you know, that could be. Yeah, was Tiger here last year? Somebody said he was. You know that?
That's what we've heard, yes.
Yeah. Well, I didn't see him. I didn't. He may have not had my card, you know. The closest I've been, I saw him in Sheboygan at the PGA a few years ago, but only at a distance. I don't know of anything about Tiger. At one time, Oprah Winfrey was here, and she was going to do a boat, but I didn't get to meet Oprah either. I did get to meet the King of Spain along the way, and a few other people. I didn't even get to talk about our friend Countoletta. Anyway, yes.
This latest boat, the newest one that you mentioned at the beginning, is that for a European or American? Can't you say?
Yeah, they're a little reluctant to say, but they're headed for the Mediterranean. Headed for the Mediterranean, excuse me.
Can you see the last two pictures?
Oh, sure. This is just a lovely boat called Shanachie, really fast. You can see it looks like it's fast in this picture. Built for a fellow by the name of Jim Warmington, who was in the real estate business quite successfully in Southern California. And that's 120, and this one's 124. And it's Timonier, and you see it's just about in the space where U.S. Air landed in the Hudson River with the Empire State Building. Wonderful customer from Rochester, New York. They're all part of the Eastman family as in Eastman Kodak. There were better days back then. But this boat, we have pictures of her in Alaska. She circumnavigated the globe. They were, completely a crew. La Baroness had a crew of 14, and this boat would have a crew of about 6. Pretty comfortable living, really, and that era from the mid '80s, about the time that we put the building up on Kentucky Street through the time we sold to Andy McKelvey. I like to think of that as kind of the golden years it was of my career anyway, because the motorboats and the sailboats that we built then really were with world reputation. This is delivered in 1978. She was a complete breakthrough boat. We didn't know the name of the customer for the first 8 months, and it leaked out one evening, and it was just Mike and I knew, actually, after that. But it's the Royal Yacht of Spain for Juan Carlos. And you see her, that's a picture taken by my next-door neighbor, Wayne Harmon, from a helicopter. That's Fortuna at 52 knots. And that is fast. 65 miles an hour with a 100-footer is quite a feeling of speed. They had, this boat was very light, built all of the lightest possible aluminum alloy to get maximum speed out of it. And it had, in the middle, a jet engine, a gas turbine, which really an airplane engine. And then it was all went through a water jet, which is like a great big pump. If you've had, a jet ski, pumps water out the back. The pump in them was 16 inches. And where would you find a 16-inch pump like that? You'd never guess. The pump was a fuel pump. A what? That's right, a fuel pump. The pump was a 16-inch fuel pump for a pump. It was supplied to us by the Rocketdyne division of North American Rockwell, and what it was is an adaptation of a hydrogen fuel cell pump for the Saturn missile. And it could empty an Olympic swimming pool in 16 seconds. Yeah, I guess who is it? Vanderbilt says if you have to ask. Yep. But I happen to know the answer to that. It burned 1.1 tons an hour. Now you have to guess. 1.1 tons of fuel an hour. 2,200 pounds of fuel in an hour. They measure fuel by pounds in a boat. And in fact, it was during the fuel crisis when the boat was delivered, and I was in my office. The king had sent a White Russian prince, Zurab Chukuta, was his envoy, and he lived with us for the last 4 or 5 months of the boat. He was in my office one day when the boss called, and because there were issues. Fuel, it was 1978. Fuel was not available anywhere, and we were putting the thing on a boat. It was going to Southampton to be dropped off and then run down to the Mediterranean with the king on board. And so Don Shad, the architect, and Zurab were on the phone, and Don breaks into a big grin. And when they hung up, he said, "Bill, the fuel problem's solved." He said, "His Majesty just called Prince Philip and from England, and called Prince Philip and said, not to worry, we'll get you bunkered off one of my destroyers." Incidentally, the boat was not paid for with Spanish money. It was not paid for with King Juan Carlos's money. It was a gift from Crown Prince Fahd of Saudi Arabia. You know, we royalty got to stick together, right? Any other questions? Thank you very much for your kind attention.